The lighting's looking pretty good, so what we need to do now is put some surfaces on. So let's use the surface editor. That's over here in the left, and you're going to see that these are always here no matter what tab I'm in. Okay, so even the new effects tools tab, that surface editor is always right there. So we're going to hit Surface Editor, and the Surface Editor panel comes up. So what we're going to do in this section is really just kind of work through this using this as a tutorial. And then when we go on to our next projects, we'll just kind of rip through it a little bit faster. So what we can see here is we've got our surface names. Now these were created in Modeler. When we pressed the Q key and we called up the Create Surface dialog, that actually named those polygons. And if we open up Hammer, you can see here's Hammer Handle and Hammer Head. Also, here's the ground plane that we created. These are listed with their own groupings because it's set to Edit by Object, which means each object has its own group of surfaces. You can change this to Scene, but what will happen is they'll say everything with the same name will be considered the same surface. So you need to be careful with that. I don't have it as a problem because I've always named things specifically, and you should do the same. And that way, my surface name list is a little bit neater. You can filter that between textures and shaders and previews, depending on what you have on. In my 18-20 years using Lightwave, never had to do that once. So you can look at different patterns. Let's say you called many things head, and you can see, look, there it just isolates to just that selection. So it's great when you've got really big lists all the way down. All right, this little guy right here will actually close that up. So if you want to just kind of maximize your screen, you're working on one, it's a good way to go. All right, so now, and also while I did that, you can see here that the surface name list is right here. You can just choose at the top and work your way down. So now let's take a look at these tabs on here. Quickly, I'll say that the load, save, and rename, that will work for these surfaces. So this default, well, that's really just default. We're not using it. The ground plane, I can hit rename and just call it ground if I wanted. Easy enough. It doesn't change the surface here. It just changes the name. This display right here is showing a full render. So if I click, I can see here's my render output, but maybe I want to look at just the color channel, which is white. Or I want to look at just the luminosity, which there's none, but if I put some on, now you can see that there's luminosity showing in there. All right. I've only had to do this once in a while. I pretty much always keep that on like that. You look at various options in here. You can have a sample size of 1 meter. And let's say if you were doing planets and things like that, this might not be a good representation for some of your image mapping and procedural textures, so you might want to change that sample size. I've never really had to do that much, especially now with this VPR mode, and we get to see things in real time right there in layout. I don't really worry about that too much. You can, however, change it to a cube. Some people like that. You can look at a checkerboard background, just black, and it might be confusing because I said just black, but in layout here it is black. Well, that is because I'll come over here to Windows and go to Backdrop Options. My backdrop color is initially set to black. And that's all the area way behind there. And here's a little tip. If you press the the tab key, which is right under the tilde key, all your panels will just kind of pop away. It's kind of an instant way to hide. It's the exact same thing as Photoshop, by the way. So, okay, now if I hold the Command key or my right mouse button and click and drag on this move tool, you can see that my background back there is black. Tab key brings back my panels. So I can change this now, maybe to just gray, something like that. And when I close this, you'll see that update. And if I look back here, and let's update this thing, you can see that now I have a gray backdrop. It matches what's back there. And with this gray backdrop, it's actually going to change the look of this lighting just a little bit. So if we change this, let's say, to just pure white, doesn't look like much, but once we put some reflections on, it's going to start showing that reflection. Or if we put another environmental lighting on, such as radiosity settings, that will show up in there as well. So let's just keep it kind of a default gray for the time being. Some other preview options in here show anti-aliasing, which I don't. That just takes up a little more processing, but see these little chunky edges right there in that preview? Anti-aliasing will smooth those out, so it's actually much cleaner. Use scene lights or use a default OpenGL light. Scene lights means it's actually showing some of the lighting that we have in our scene. So here it's lit from the top and it's blue off to the side, just the way we set up the lights in the last video. You can have real-time, automatic, or manual. I generally keep it on automatic because real time it will be always updating no matter what you're doing. And even though computers are pretty fast now, as you get more complex, it might start to slow down on you. Try that with your system. It could be trial and error. What automatic does is it lets me update, and then when I let go, it updates the preview. Okay, so it really just depends on how often you use that preview. Okay, so that's it for there. You can see surface selected. It's the ground, which is the name there. There's 2 polygons with that. No textures, no shaders, and just 1 node. Now the node is something we're going to talk about later on, but that's this guy right here. That is the node editor, and it's a network of surfacing versus this layered list, which is what we're doing here. All right, so color. I think that's self-explanatory. Luminosity, it's self-bright. It's great for light bulbs and fireflies and things like that. Diffuse, that tells the surface how much light to take from the scene. Specularity is how shiny it is. And let's go here to the hammer head, and let's put some specularity on. And you can see right there in the interface it's getting shiny. Glossiness, of course, less gloss is lower value. High gloss is a higher value. Pretty simple. And you would do high gloss for something like glass. You do a low gloss for something like metal. So we're going to keep this a little bit lower. And I'm going to bring my specularity back a bit. Something a little more reasonable. Reflection. Well, we want it to reflect. Now, the reflection's on by default. And you can see it's already reflecting the ground. But the more I bring it up, the brighter it gets, like it's glowing. So what you want to do, and I'm just doing metal from what I know, around 30%. And this is just a rule I've had. People have had my training before know that I always say, make your diffuse value and your reflection value equal to about 100. So if diffuse is already 100 and this is 30, we're at 130. We actually want this to be about 70. And that will help balance that brightness. You can see right now that it actually looks a lot better, more tame, because that diffuse value and reflection values aren't jumping over 100. If you want your object transparent, there you go. It could be for glass. And once that's transparent, you can put refraction on. And with the right amount of refraction, you can start making glass. And again, the VPR showing us right away our real-time render. It looks really nice. And translucency. Now, we don't really need this here. This is good for leaves or paper or something thin like that. Right? And a translucency differs from transparency in that transparency you can see all the way through. A translucent object, well, simply hold up a sheet or a napkin or something thin to a light. When you're looking at it, just on the table for instance, it's solid. When you hold it up to a light source, you can see the light permeating through. That's translucency. Smoothing, very important. Now, we're going to put smoothing on for the hammerhead, but we want to make sure that we don't put too much on, because sometimes it will start folding into itself or give it a crack of sorts. Specifically, the side area here of the hammer and this flat head here. It doesn't look like we're getting much error, so we're pretty good, but I'm going to bring the smoothing value down just a little bit. And what that'll do is help smooth out little facets of polygons. This is a Phong shading technique, just a math function that smooths out all those little areas. And just to explain that further, let me jump into Modeler real quick. And if I make a ball, see all these facets that make up the ball itself? Let's put on flat shade. Okay, so you think that ball might not have enough geometry in it, so you hit the D key, Shift D, and we're going to subdivide this. We'll do smooth because it's a round object. And you think, well, that's not enough, and you would keep subdividing because you see all these facets. That's different than using the smoothing in the surface editor. Now notice that the surface editor I popped open in Modeler looks exactly like the one in Layout. I didn't show you this earlier because my process is that we should surface in Layout because that's where all the lighting is done. You don't light in Modeler. And because surfacing has such an important role in combination with lighting, I feel it's important to show you in Layout. But once you get comfortable with it, you're more than welcome to go ahead and model something and put some surfaces on right here in Modeler and get used to working that way. And if I want to tweak a model that was surfaced in Layout, I can do this here in Modeler as well. But going back to smoothing, if I turn this on and I change flat shade to a smooth shade, look at what happens. Now we have a wonderfully smooth object, just because smoothing was on. If I turn it off, you can see the facets. Okay, so it's a shading. That's all it is. It's just a shading feature. But when you have flat objects and edges that need to be smooth and you do too much, that smoothing kind of rolls over and creates a little bit of distortion in the flatter area. So what I like to do is set this, just bring it down to 0. And when you have surfaces in question that they don't need to be 100% smooth. In fact, they don't need to be the original 89% smooth, usually somewhere around 12 or 20. That really helps control how much smoothing. So look, so while it defaulted to 89, somewhere right around 25, even 20, even 15, is enough smoothing on here to get rid of those facets. Okay, and that's a degree, so 15 degrees. So, we'll quit out of there. And for this hammer, we can do the same thing. And let's take a look, see if we can get closer. I know I'm spending a little bit of time on smoothing, but it's actually pretty important because I've had emails from people, especially when they're doing text, and they got all these weird errors in the front of their fonts. Well, it's because they have too much smoothing on. So I'm going to put this on, and actually this object's looking so good I don't even think this is making much difference. I want to make sure that I'm not seeing those facets here. Oh, there they are. Right in there. I don't want any of those. And there they are up in there. Okay. So let's just bring this to 20 degrees and see how that looks. And generally, most of the time, that's enough. It sure is, yeah. See, so those facets are now gone from that area right there in the handle. All right, so that's great. You know what I do now? Save. So this is hammer lit. Let's go like this. File. Saves scene increment. That's hammer lit 01. Now, with Lightwave, there's kind of a thing we have to be aware of. Your surfaces do not save with your scene. Okay, so everything we're doing here is not going to save unless we go File, Save All Objects. But I'm not going to do that because I want you to be able to load this. So I'm going to save object copy. And this is hammer surfaced. And remember, we set up our content directory earlier in the course, so these are all going to the same place. Now, even though I saved a copy, look at my current item at the bottom. It still says hammer 4. Okay? I need to be sure that I replace that. So I'm going to go to items right here. Under replace, with the hammer selected, current item is hammer. I'm going to replace current hammer with an object of hammer surfaced. And again, Lightwave knows where to go because I had set up my content directory. Bink. Now our current item is hammer surfaced. Our original plain hammer is untouched. And now we can go ahead and make changes and say File, Save All Objects, Yes, and Command or Control S to save the scene. So that works really well. Now when you guys load this, you'll see the surfaced hammer. You load the old one, you'll see the unsurfaced hammer. All right, so let's go back to the hammerhead. We've got a 29% reflection. And while this was reflecting the environment, it needs something a little bit more because the environment's kind of plain. So go to the Environment tab. The reflection options are defaulting to ray tracing and backdrop. Ray tracing is what happens, it's what the computer does in order to calculate shadows and light and reflections. It sends out a ray, it sends out a beam, almost like a signal. You internet guys, it's like pinging something. And that ray goes and bounces and calculates and does all the math. That is the extent of my programming knowledge. Thank you. And what we also wanted to use is a reflection map. Okay, so I'm going to say load image, and I've got a reflection map already in your images folder. Now there is one in here called Chrome that I put in, but let's just choose this reflection map. And all this is just, it's one I've had, it's been in Lightwave for 20 years. It's a tiny little fractal noise pattern. You can make this with the clouds feature in Photoshop if you wanted. And click OK. And ray tracing and backdrop. Well, it also needs to reflect this. So I'm going to say ray tracing and spherical map. And now you can see that there's actual reflections, streaks, something like that, inside that hammerhead. And let's rotate around so we can see it. It doesn't look like it's showing up too much, and that's partly for two things. One, the reflection map might be a little dull for it. We might need something a little stronger. But first, we can go back to basic and increase the amount of reflection. And then of course we need to offset that with the diffuse. Well, still not enough, so let's go to the environment, and instead of ray tracing and spherical map, let's just do spherical map alone. And now look at it. So now it's not blending the environment with the hammer, it's just reflecting this map alone. And then we can go back here, and I'll make this 80, hit the tab key, and go to 20. So it's only reflecting that map a little bit, like 20%. Okay, so your choice. That's what you can do. You can go into spherical map or ray tracing in spherical map. That's what I'm going to choose, and we can work with the environment a little bit later. Let's try a different image. So reflection map, just click and hold on here, hit load image, and let's try the chrome. Okay. Now chrome on this probably isn't exactly what we need. Works great if we have something a little more round in terms of like a, I don't know, like a metal ball or a hubcap or something. So I think the fractals are the way to go. There is another image I have, and let me just call it up if I can get to it. Okay, it's called tinfoil, and it's totally lame that it's a crumpled piece of tinfoil that I've been using forever, but I like it. So let's open that one up, and we've got tinfoil as a spherical map. Let's go back to basic, and let's increase this a little bit and decrease this a little so they balance out. And like always, that tinfoil creates a great surface. It's just a nice reflection where it doesn't stand out too much, but has just a little bit of metal shimmer in there. So you can play with this, adjust it, that's in there. But you can also put on reflection blurring. And I'm going to put just 10%. You never need to blur too much. Just a little bit is all you really need. Now this does add to the render time, so just something to be careful of. I'm going to leave it on. Alright, so there is a hammer with a little bit of reflection. I think I might even go a little bit more. Keep this about 50, and maybe let's pump this up to 50. So everything you do, every time you change a little value, so in this case I put blurred reflections on, it changed the look of it a bit. So reflections are very sensitive, surfacing is very sensitive when it comes to the environment and the lighting and everything else. So just something to think of. And see how dark this is over here? Well, I know that my reflection value is really pretty good all across the top. So let's go to Windows and choose Backdrop Options. And instead of that gray now, let's pump this up maybe. Let's happen if we go white. Okay, not a whole lot, but it's just reflecting that. If I want that light to actually help light my scene, we're going to jump ahead to something we'd probably do later on, but let's go to Render and then choose Render Globals. And in the second tab here, third tab, under Global Illumination is Enable Radiosity. And I'm going to push this aside and just turn that on. And see what happens? That white environment now is helping to light the scene. So it's entirely too bright. If you put on Gradient Backdrop, you can see that the blue to soft blue to black actually is what's lighting the scene. So if I take this now and I make this a little more gray, that lights the scene. Okay, so that's what radiosity does. It's not always needed. It's actually great for architecture and interiors. It's also really good for product shots because, again, the environment itself is helping to light the scene, and that's what the radiosity does. So we're going to turn that off for the time being. All right, so there is the hammer. I'm going to hit Command S to save, and it'll say, yes, do you want to save over it? Yes, I do. And then I'm also going to go File, Save All Objects. And the all objects are hammer surfaced. And so you can load that up as is. Let's go to the next video and put some wood around this handle.